July 1st, 2025. Astronomers notice a strange object hurtling toward the sun at 60 kilometers per second. It doesn't belong to our solar system. It flies past stars and planets like a random visitor. This is 3I Atlas, the third interstellar visitor in history. But with each new observation, more and more mysteries emerge around it. It changes color. It sheds material that shouldn't be there. And when it passes close to Mars, communication with several observatories is briefly interrupted. Coincidence or not? In this video, we'll explore what 3I Atlas is, why it's called anomalous, and whether Avi Loeb really has reason to believe it might be more than just a comet. It was named 3I Atlas. 3I stands for Third Interstellar Object. Atlas is the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Its velocity was exceeding 25 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, too fast to be gravitated by our planets. When astronomers first spotted 3I Atlas, they immediately realized it was no ordinary comet. It was moving too fast, at too odd an angle, and clearly didn't come from deep within our solar system. This is only the third interstellar object ever detected. The first was the famous Oumuamua in 2017, and the second was 2I Borisov in 2019. We only started seeing such rocks recently, simply because we didn't have the necessary equipment before. Only modern survey telescopes, sensitive detectors, and space observatories like James Webb have made it possible to notice such dim and fast guests flying through our system in just a few months. One of the first things astronomers tried to measure was the size of the core. However, it turned out that 3I Atlas is hidden beneath a thick coma, a cloud of gas and dust that reflects sunlight and obscures its true shape. According to Hubble data, the core is estimated to be between 0.3 and 5.6 kilometers in size. This range is enormous, but the reason is simple. Some of the light we see comes not from the core itself, but from the surrounding gas cloud. Early estimates suggested a size of up to 20 kilometers, but as observations became more accurate, these estimates became more conservative. Scientists now believe that its core is small but extremely dense and active. But its speed is truly interstellar. When discovered, 3I Atlas was traveling at about 60 kilometers per second, roughly 220,000 kilometers per hour. For comparison, that's almost 100 times faster than a rifle bullet. Its orbit is hyperbolic, meaning it's not bound to the sun and doesn't orbit it like our planets and comets. It simply flies past, accelerated by gravity, and disappears forever back into the interstellar darkness. And if you look up at the sky now in the direction it came from, roughly in the constellation Sagittarius, then somewhere out there, billions of kilometers away, lies its home. And here's where the most astonishing part begins. According to researchers' calculations, 3I Atlas may be older than Earth itself. Its age is estimated at 714 billion years, almost as old as our own galaxy. How is this possible? This object was likely ejected from its star system at the dawn of the Milky Way. Perhaps at some point in the distant past, it orbited an ancient star until the gravity of neighboring planets flung it away, on an eternal journey through interstellar space. For billions of years, it drifted in the cold until it accidentally crossed the path of our solar system. And here comes the second mystery. According to James Webb, a huge amount of carbon dioxide, CO2, has been detected in its coma, which is unusual as most known comets contain water as their main constituent. This means that 3I Atlas likely formed far from its star, in a very cold region where ice and carbon dioxide could have existed for millions of years without evaporating. This recipe makes it chemically unlike comets in our solar system. It could be said to represent a different chemistry from a different stellar era. And the most interesting thing is, even despite its antiquity, it remains active. When the sun heats its surface, the ice begins to evaporate, releasing gases and dust, creating a bright, iridescent coma. Scientists say that by observing it, we are literally peering into the past, to the era when the first stars and planets in the galaxy were forming. 3I Atlas is a time capsule that has traveled through billions of years and now, for a brief moment, has shown us what worlds looked like long before our Earth. And just when astronomers had figured out what was flying toward us, the real mysteries began. One of the first things that surprised everyone was its color. At first, 3I Atlas looked reddish, as if covered in dust and old oxides. A red tint usually indicates a surface rich in large particles reflecting sunlight, something like Mars or an old dusty comet. But just a few weeks later, 3I Atlas suddenly turned green. And this wasn't a telescope error. The glow actually changed. The reason is chemical. When the sun began heating the object, the ice in its core began to evaporate, releasing gases, carbon, and cyanide into space. When exposed to ultraviolet light, these molecules literally begin to glow green. This isn't just a reflection, but a true chemical backlight, a natural neon sign of interstellar origin. Scientists say this is how a comet wakes up. At first it's warm and dusty, then it lights up, and we see its true nature. But here's the strange thing. The closer it got to the sun, the more signs showed that 3I Atlas wasn't like an ordinary comet. And this is where Professor Avi Loeb comes in, with hypotheses that sound like something out of science fiction. Avi Loeb is a renowned theoretical physicist at Harvard who isn't afraid to point out the strangest details in the universe. He believes there's a 40% chance that 3I Atlas isn't just a comet, but a product of alien technology. In his papers, Loeb has identified 8 anomalies that he believes are difficult to explain with classical cometary models. The first and perhaps most notable is its unusual trajectory. According to Loeb, 3I Atlas's orbital plane is tilted from the ecliptic, the plane in which the planets of the solar system orbit, by only 5 degrees. This is incredibly small, assuming the object came from a random direction in interstellar space. Loeb estimates the probability of such a coincidence to be very low, around 0.2%. Why is this strange? Because other interstellar visitors arrived incorrectly. Oumuamua arrived at an inclination of 122 degrees. 2I Borisov, about 44 degrees. That is, their trajectories were far from the plane of the solar system, which is logical for objects ejected from other star systems with random orientations. Loeb believes that such a precise approximation is almost like winning the cosmic lottery? Or is this a deliberate route, supposedly set for visiting Venus, Mars, and Jupiter? But can this be refuted as an anomaly? Yes, and there are arguments to the contrary. Some critics point out that Loeb may be overestimating the anomaly by choosing precisely those parameters that look impressive. After the fact, some models suggest that gravitational interactions with other stars, gas clouds, and time could have caused the interstellar object to accidentally align itself almost in the plane of the ecliptic. This isn't necessarily intentional, but simply one possible natural explanation. Loeb rightly raises the question, 3I Atlas's trajectory does indeed look unusual, almost precisely calibrated, but unusual doesn't necessarily mean artificial. There's ample reason for caution. Some claims may be the result of statistical and methodological biases. However, if it were indeed a probe or spacecraft, its trajectory could have been optimized to visit key planets, further heightening the intrigue. The second anomaly is a strange anti-tail. 3I Atlas showed a sunward jet, anti-tail, which is not an optical illusion from a geometric perspective, unlike familiar comets. Usually, a comet's tail extends away from the sun. The solar wind literally blows away dust and gas. But 3I Atlas's tail, on the contrary, was pointing toward the sun. Scientists initially thought it was simply an optical effect. The tail was angled so that it appeared to point forward. This happens with some comets when Earth is almost on their orbital line. But calculations showed that in the case of 3I Atlas, this was no illusion. Its anti-tail was indeed pointing toward the sun. This is extremely unusual, but there is a very terrestrial explanation for this. When the comet's surface heats up, the ice begins to evaporate. It melts especially rapidly on the sunlit side. Tiny snow grains, some quite large, eject from the core. They are heavier, so the pressure of sunlight can't simply blow them away like dust. As a result, these particles continue to move by inertia toward the sun, visually forming a reverse tail. Scientists have modeled this effect and shown that 3I Atlas may indeed have this shape, not due to an optical illusion, but due to the peculiarities of the ejection of matter from the illuminated side. So the anti-tail isn't a sign of aliens, but simply another example of how beautifully and unpredictably nature behaves, even when it comes to a visitor from another star system. Let's dig deeper and take an honest look at the third anomaly, the claim that 3I Atlas is 1,000,000 times more massive than Oumuamua and 1,000 times more massive than Borisov. Yet it's moving faster. Yes, 3I Atlas is noticeably larger than previous interstellar visitors, but the claim 1,000,000 times more massive depends on a number of strong assumptions about size, shape, and density. Real mass estimates have huge uncertainties, and with reasonable assumptions, the mass ratio is more likely in the thousands or hundreds of thousands, rather than a reliable million. And what about speed? Oumuamua's speed is 26 to 38 kilometers. For 2I Borisov, speeds of around 30-40 kilometers are cited. 3I Atlas was indeed moving faster, around 60 kilometers per second, but this is not a sign of an engine or artificiality. The speed of interstellar objects depends on how they were ejected from their host systems. If a body was ejected, for example, by gravitational interaction with a giant planet, it could easily accelerate much faster than others. Large and fast interstellar objects are entirely possible to exist naturally. It's just that 3I Atlas is the largest and most active of those we've seen so far, making it unusual. Neither the mass nor the speed of 3I Atlas indicate an artificial origin. This simply suggests that the universe contains interstellar bodies of a wide range of sizes and speeds, and we're only just beginning to understand just how diverse they can be. The fourth anomaly is the arrival time and location of 3I Atlas. It passes within tens of millions of kilometers of planets like Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. Yet, during its perihelion, the moment of closest approach to the Sun, it remains nearly invisible from Earth because it lies behind the Sun from our perspective. Let's look into the details. 3I Atlas is calculated to have made its closest approach to Mars at approximately 19 astronomical units, 28 million kilometers, on October 3, 2025. Its perihelion, its closest point to the Sun, occurs at approximately 1.35 astronomical units, NASA 203 million kilometers. From the Sun, approximately on October 29, 2025. And what's important? It will be difficult to see from Earth because it will be practically behind the Sun. The angle between it and the Sun will be very small. The solar angular separation is approximately 1 at perihelion. Why this doesn't indicate an artificial object? Close passes to planets do not mean a targeted visit. A pass at 0.99 AU from Mars is 28 million kilometers. On the one hand, this is close by astronomical standards, but on the other, it is still a very large distance and could very well be a coincidence. No observational evidence of maneuvers. To consider an object artificial, we would look for signs of a deliberate maneuver, changing its trajectory or activity at precisely the right moment to approach planets or escape. Nothing of the sort has been reliably detected. The fifth anomaly of 3I Atlas. Scientists noticed that the gas cloud around this interstellar object contained an unusually high amount of nickel, while it contained almost no iron. The ratio of nickel to cyanide, substances containing carbon and nitrogen, was thousands of times higher than that of all known comets, including 2I Borisov. At first glance, this sounds truly mysterious. After all, nickel and iron usually occur together in nature. They form in the cores of stars during supernova explosions and end up in comets in roughly equal quantities. And here, something has upset this balance. Some researchers have even compared this ratio to industrial nickel alloys, the kind used on Earth for super strong components in space structures. In short, this has led to speculation that 3I Atlas might be artificial. But let's take this matter one step further. When scientists study a comet's composition, they don't sample it directly. All we have is a spectrum of light, that is, a chemical fingerprint of what evaporates from the surface. This means we don't see the entire object, but only what fell into the gaseous envelope at the precise moment of observation. And here's an important detail. If the surface of 3I Atlas is covered, for example, with layers of nickel-carbon compounds, and the iron is located deeper, then when heated by the sun, it will be the nickel that evaporates first. This effect could create the illusion of a pure nickel coma, although the interior composition may be quite ordinary. There's another possibility. 3I Atlas was born in a different star system, where the chemical conditions were completely different from ours. Perhaps there's simply more nickel, less iron, or the temperatures at which the dust grains formed were different. In other words, a strange chemical balance. Doesn't necessarily mean it's artificial. It could simply be an example of how diverse matter is in the universe. The sixth anomaly is related to water. For typical comets in our solar system, water is a key component. Ice, evaporating as it approaches the sun, creates a bright coma and tail. But something is different with 3I Atlas. Scientists have discovered that the gas cloud around it contains much less water than expected, only a fraction of a few percent by mass. This is completely unusual for comets from our solar system. Imagine, a comet is usually like a snow globe that melts in the sun, releasing a lot of water vapor. Here, however, it's like a ball of dry ice and dust. There is water, but very little of it, while other gases, such as carbon dioxide, CO2, dominate. Why is this surprising? First, if 3I Atlas is just a comet, then where is the regular water ice we see in comets in our solar system? Second, the high proportion of other gases suggests that the formation conditions of this object could have been very different. Third, it looks like we're dealing with a dry body, or a body with water hidden or trapped on the surface. But, and this is important, this doesn't mean 3I Atlas is a spacecraft or an artificial object. Here's why. First, the presence of a smaller amount of water can be explained by natural causes. For example, the core could have had a dense crust that prevented the evaporation of water ice, while other volatiles, CO2, CO, etc., were more easily released. Second, the object came from another star system, where the formation conditions could have been completely different. Less water ice, more dry materials and volatile compounds. Third, there are still large uncertainties in the observations. When we say a few percent water, it's an estimate with an error, not a precise value. We may simply not see all the water, some of it could be hidden. The seventh anomaly of 3I Atlas is related to a property invisible to the naked eye: light polarization. When light reflects off a comet's dust, its waves are slightly aligned in a specific direction. This is called polarization, and it helps scientists understand what the dust is made of and how fine or dense it is. Most comets have positive polarization. This means the reflected light behaves roughly as we expect. The waves are partially ordered and their direction depends on the viewing angle, but for 3I Atlas, it's the opposite. Scientists detected extremely negative polarization, the strongest ever observed in a comet, including 2I Borisov. Simply put, the light was reflected in a completely different direction than it should have. Sounds weird, right? Some enthusiasts immediately declared, this behavior could indicate an artificial surface, maybe it's metallic like a ship's panel? But if you dig deeper, there are much more plausible explanations. First, negative polarization can occur if dust particles are very small and clumped together, forming loose clumps. Such structures can capture light and reflect it at unusual angles, creating the effect of reversed polarization. Second, it all depends on the composition of the dust. If it's rich in carbon, graphite, or other dark substances, the light isn't simply reflected, it's partially absorbed, and the light waves are scattered in a special way. This behavior has also been observed in some asteroids, also completely natural bodies. Finally, it's important to remember, 3I Atlas is an interstellar object. It originated in another system where the dust could have been chemically and physically different. Rather than indicating an artificial origin, it rather points to a unusual surface structure and dust composition. It's as if we've discovered a new kind of stardust that no one has ever seen before. Not aliens, but another reminder of how diverse the universe is. And finally, the eighth anomaly, and perhaps the most intriguing. 3I Atlas came to us in a direction that almost matches that of the famous radio signal, the WOW signal. This signal was recorded in 1977 by the Big Ear Radio Observatory and remains an unsolved mystery. It turns out that 3I Atlas's trajectory leads it out of the constellation Sagittarius, the same region from which, according to analysis, the WOW signal may have originated. It all sounds almost like a science fiction scenario. An interstellar object and a mysterious signal. Could they be connected? Proponents of the alien ship hypothesis immediately seized on this detail. They said here was proof. The signal could have been a launch, and now the craft itself had arrived. But if we put aside the sensationalism and look at it realistically, everything becomes much simpler. First, the sky isn't a map with narrow streets. 9 degrees is a vast swath of sky, potentially containing millions of stars and potential sources. A coincidence in direction doesn't necessarily mean the object is connected to the same source as the WOW signal. Second, WOW was a single pulse that hasn't recurred in decades. Most astrophysicists believe it was a natural radio source, perhaps a distant flare or even a reflection from a satellite that couldn't yet be accurately identified. Finally, it's important to remember, the trajectory of 3I Atlas is measured with a certain uncertainty, just like the precise direction of the ancient radio signal. Yes, it sounds impressive. The object came from the same source as the mysterious signal, but in reality, it's a random intersection of directions across a vast expanse of sky. No scientific analysis has yet shown any connection between 3I Atlas and the WOW signal. And frankly, there's even something beautiful about it. We see how people yearn to find connections, to find meaning in the chaos of the universe. But that's the power of science, to distinguish coincidences from patterns and to find wonder not in fantasy, but in reality itself. I'm not trying to ridicule Avi Loeb. On the contrary, I respect him for his courage in raising topics that others are afraid to discuss. But, to be honest, the likelihood that 3I Atlas is a technological object is, in my opinion, very small. Not 40%, not 10%, more like single digits. Although I admit, I would love for scientists to one day find evidence of intelligent life beyond Earth. This would undoubtedly be the greatest discovery in human history. And yes, I admit, in a very small probability, 3I Atlas could be something artificial, disguised as a comet, perhaps even a spacecraft like our Voyagers, an envoy from another civilization simply passing by. One could imagine that it was once moving faster and then slowed down upon entering the solar system. But all of this is just a beautiful hypothesis. Unlikely, but inspiring. On October 3, 2025, 3I Atlas flew past Mars at a distance of approximately 30 million kilometers. It was at this moment that the cameras on Mars orbiters had a unique opportunity to peer at the interstellar visitor. The European Space Agency deployed the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, TGO, and its CASIS camera captured a faint, fuzzy spot, a comet surrounded by a coma of gas and dust. NASA's Perseverance rover, using its navigation camera, NavCam, captured a strange, glowing streak in the Martian sky, and a wave of theories immediately arose online. Many claim to have seen a cylinder, as if it weren't a comet, but a probe or even an alien spacecraft. Why a cylinder? As scientists and analysts explain, the problem may not be the object's shape at all, but rather the shooting technique. This image is the result of stacking together hundreds of images, taken over approximately 10 minutes, while 3I Atlas slowly moved across NavCam's field of view. With such a long exposure, a moving object leaves a trail. Instead of a dot, we get an elongated line, a visual blurring effect, not the comet's actual structure. In a separate short frame with a minimum shutter speed, 3I Atlas would likely appear as a faint dot rather than an elongated cylinder. Experts agree. Moreover, according to some analysts, including Avi Loeb, these frames may have been distorted not by the strange nature of the object, but simply by movement and the image stacking algorithm. But here's the interesting thing. The HiRISE, High-Resolution Imaging Science Experiment, cameras on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MRO, which could have captured very sharp images, have not yet released anything publicly. Questions are also circulating online about why China, Tianwen-1 mission, and the UAE, Hope probe, both of which had the chance to observe the comet during their flyby, are keeping silent and not sharing images. You may have noticed a strange detail. The official HiRISE website now states that any images of interstellar comet 3I Atlas are considered federal news by NASA, and due to the government shutdown, NASA publications are temporarily frozen. What does this mean? When the U.S. undergoes a shutdown, that is, a temporary suspension of federal operations due to Congress failing to pass a budget, NASA, as a government agency, is forced to cease all official communications, including publishing news, press releases, and images. That's why, even if cameras, such as HiRISE on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, manage to capture images of 3I Atlas, NASA cannot currently release them. This data is considered part of the agency's official information, and publishing it without approval is a violation of federal regulations. It turns out that Images of the comet may already exist, but they're locked away on NASA servers until the shutdown ends. The irony is that 3i Atlas is a rare interstellar visitor, flying through the solar system right now, and we can't see it at the moment of greatest interest simply because the government is on pause. So perhaps right now, somewhere on a NASA hard drive, there's the first detailed image of an interstellar comet, but we can only wait for it to be shown to the world. This lack of visual data from various agencies adds to the intrigue. If it were just a comet, why wouldn't everyone be shown clear photos right away? Many see this as odd and vague. This moment is one of the most tense in the history of 3i Atlas observation. Official data is scant, publications are few, and the public imagination has already conjured up an alien cylinder. In fact, the clearest images to date are a dot in the TGO images. The coma or tail is not clearly visible, possibly due to the low brightness and limitations of the camera. Right now, 3i Atlas is experiencing one of the most exciting stages of its journey. It's approaching the sun. In early October, the comet passed close to Mars, and shortly thereafter, literally starting on October 20th, it began gradually disappearing from our telescopes. The reason is simple. It passed too close to the sun. Its bright light simply blurs the sky, and even the most sensitive ground-based observatories can't detect the faint glow of the coma. But that doesn't mean we've lost it completely. While the Earth and the Sun are almost aligned with the comet, spacecraft continue to observe. For example, observatories that monitor the Sun, such as SOHO and Solar Orbiter. Their cameras are capable of peering into regions currently invisible from Earth's surface. It's from these spacecraft that scientists expect to capture the first images if 3i Atlas exhibits activity. A flare, dust emission, or even partial disintegration. On October 29-30, 2025, 3i Atlas will pass its perihelion, the moment when it is closest to the Sun, at a distance of approximately 1.36 astronomical units, just beyond Earth's orbit. This isn't a dangerous approach, but the physics involved are impressive. Under the influence of the Sun's gravity, the comet accelerates sharply, reaching speeds of 68 kilometers per second. After passing its minimum point, its speed will begin to decrease, and it will once again plunge into the cold of interstellar space. During this time, the Sun literally fries the comet. Surface ices evaporate, creating powerful streams of gas and dust. These are what form the tail, which can significantly change in shape and direction. Scientists speculate that under such heat, 3i Atlas may even lose some of its mass or break into fragments. If all goes according to calculations, the comet will emerge from behind the Sun as early December, and we'll be able to observe it again from Earth. By that time, it will begin to rapidly recede, and its brightness will fade to magnitude 12-13, meaning a telescope will be essential. However, even faint reflections of light will allow scientists to refine the shape of the orbit and check whether it has changed since being heated. What's interesting is that in the coming weeks we'll essentially be blind. We won't see the comet itself, but only the data collected by the solar probes. If 3i Atlas exhibits anomalous activity, we won't know about it immediately, but only after several hours or even days when the signals and images reach Earth and are processed. And it's during this dark period, when the comet is hidden by sunlight, that scientists expect the most unexpected discoveries. Perhaps something unusual is happening to her right now, and we will only find out about it later. 3i Atlas is only the third interstellar wanderer we've managed to catch in our field of view. The first was Oumuamua, the second was 2i Borisov. We've only recently begun observing them because technology has only recently become sensitive enough to detect the faint traces of objects arriving from other star systems. But 3 is no coincidence. It's a hint. Such visitors pass by more often than we thought. We just haven't seen them before. Each such visit is unique. For now, we can only observe and guess, but we shouldn't just stare at the sky. Scientists are increasingly saying we need to be prepared. Create interceptor drones, small automated probes that would remain in orbit, wait for a signal, and, upon detecting a new interstellar object, immediately depart for it. Not years later when the object is already departing, but within hours of discovery. They could take photographs, take samples, measure chemical composition, and for the first time in history, humanity would obtain real data from another star system. Not just light, but matter, dust, ice. 3i Atlas is a reminder that we don't live in an isolated system. Interstellar space isn't empty. It's a kind of river current, carrying fragments of other worlds, the debris of alien planets, alien suns, and perhaps answers to questions about where it all began. When we see Three-Eye Atlas again in December, it will already be fading away, a pale speck against the backdrop of stars. But the trace it left, not dust but scientific, will linger for a long time. Each guest reminds us the universe is alive and it has stories we're only just learning to understand. Let us know in the comments what you think. A comet or technology that arrived for a reason? And if you're curious where this story will lead us, subscribe. There's a lot of exciting stuff ahead.